everyone had a chance to look over the agenda? Are there any changes or adjustments? No changes or adjustments?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
A second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to adoption of minutes. Any concerns or questions about the minutes from last meeting?
A motion to approve?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Okay. Moving on to our first order of business, subdivision, the Vista at Lake Wiley.
Good evening. Marion Ray, Associate Planner for York County. Tonight is a request for Planning Commission modifications to an existing approved preliminary plat.
Sorry, folks. I've got a very loose something going on over here. No, it's me, and it's,
Oh, it's you?
Oh.
yeah, and it's loose in the mount here, so as I bumped it, it makes noise. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that, Marion.
As long as it's not me, right? Okay, so we'll go through what we had. This is the property here in the Lake Wiley community. It is on 274, right at the intersection of Pole Branch. The original preliminary plat that was approved in October. This is, the zoning was RUD and the Lake Wiley overlay, 140 lots, almost 179 acres, and the minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. So, due to the Planning Commission's concern about the significant loss of grand trees, the applicant heard and modified the project and came back with a plan addressing those concerns. As part of the revision, the applicant is requesting several accommodations from the Planning Commission. So this is the original grand tree exhibit from the October plat. And then this is the revision. It's a little bit harder to see, but the grand trees, I'll go back one, see in the back corner in the front were the two largest stands. The revision saves those two stands. It's still the same information, 140 lots, same acreage, same minimum lot size. So as a part of this, in order to save those grand trees, they have to request several accommodations from the Planning Commission. There's a total of 5. 2 for cluster size and then 3 for cluster separation. I'll go through the comments or the reasons here. So the code reference, cluster groups are residential lots within cluster subdivisions that shall be designed within a series of 1 or more cluster groups in accordance with the following standards. So I've clipped out the ones that made sense for tonight. The first one is dwellings shall be located in a distinct cluster group of 15 or fewer buildings or dwellings. The Planning Commission does have the ability to approve up to 20 dwellings. And then for the cluster groups shall be located minimum of 200 feet from existing public roads and other cluster groups. The Planning Commission does have the ability to reduce that separation to no less than 100 feet. And go through here. This is the cluster subdivision design standards, why it was created. I've highlighted the 2 that are kind of the most pertinent for tonight. It preserves existing healthy vegetation and wildlife habitat and maintains existing wooded areas along roads. So we have the modification requests. I have them listed here. And then I also have it broken out per slide for the different requests. You'll have the ability to approve all of them or none of them or any other combination thereof. So we have the first one. And this is the one all the way to the western side of the parcel. And it is for a modification to increase the cluster size from 15 to 18 lots. And I'll just run through them real quick and we can come back. The second one is another cluster increase from 15 lots to 16 lots. This is kind of right in the middle. And then we have the separations. So the cluster that they're requesting to be larger is only going to be 101 feet from another cluster. And this is just below it. The next one down is also 100 feet. And then the cul-de-sac at the bottom of the subdivision is also 100 feet. So I'll go back to the main picture to kind of give you an idea of where all those are. And then we can go through one by one or however you'd like to do it.
Are there any questions?
So what's reflected in the new information is all these requests
Yes.
that are
Right.
in here that I know my colleague, or our colleague Matt had brought up at the 2 meetings ago, I guess. So, okay, just wanted to make sure that that was the case. I'm assuming that was the case, but,
This is the applicant's effort to save as many grand trees.
right. Do we know how many that we saved, that we had originally, that we requested? Do we know how many more we
I don't know the
saved?
number off the top of my head. There were thousands of trees on the site, and about 500 of them were considered grand trees or close. They're saving more than 20% of those. This is what the original configuration looked like. And I believe Matt's comments were mostly about the back corner and then up front
Yeah.
by the road, those 2 big clusters. There's another cluster in the middle, but I believe their efforts were to save those 2 biggest clusters that would meet the most impact.
Can you tell me a little bit, so if the size between the clusters there for 3, 4, and 5 are approved, what type of, vegetation or buffer between the houses? I mean, I know there's not a requirement for a buffer because it's all within a neighborhood, but, I mean, are we talking about natural space, green space? Is it landscaped? What kind of?
More than likely, at 100 feet, it would be landscaped.
Question,
Mhm.
so when is there a certain replacement requirement if we do take out the trees here? Do they have to replace like grand trees, or how does that work?
They have to mitigate. It's an algorithm that I don't even try to comprehend. We have
Yeah.
somebody who does that.
Okay,
And it basically is based on the diameter, breast height, how many, that kind of thing. So they do have to mitigate the trees that they take out.
even when they reduce the grand trees to be taken out?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Miriam, could I have you go back to this is the new layout, right? No,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so everything in red is where there are grand trees? Is that what
Yes.
that's
The red are where the-
indicating, right? The red
Mhm.
loops, okay. So a couple different questions. First, we have something before us tonight about, later on in the agenda, about revising grand tree parameters.
Mhm.
Do you all have any information about, with that revision, how this would have changed? So in other words, some of these might not be identified as grand trees because of the change in specification that we're being asked to look at later tonight.
I'm not sure the exact amount. If it gets approved, they have to meet this standard. They would have to come back in order to be, revise their preliminary plat again in order to meet the new standard if it's adopted. by
Sure,
council.
I guess what I'm saying more is, if we revise the standard tonight, we have something to look at that, and it looked to me like we were changing dimensions, right?
Yes.
All right, by changing those dimensions, would that make some of these red circles get smaller because the trees that are currently identified would no longer fit the categories, what I'm asking? That's,
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
okay, so that would be happening as well.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many. but-
Okay, okay. The next question I had was about the spacing. So, do you have any information about why go to 100 feet instead of 150 feet? Or something between the 100 and 200, right? It says,
You can do however many you want. This is just what they're requesting, the accommodation, so you do have the flexibility to deny it or say 150 feet, that kind of thing.
right.
Um,
What I'm trying to ask, and
Why?
I'm not sure if the applicant is here to answer this tonight or not, okay? So I'm curious as why we went all the way to the minimum, and if there's some particular reason that was done. It looks like you have some geographic limitations about I can't push this back any further, things like that. So I was just curious why went to the 100 right away instead of, oh, well, we won't be at 200, but we'll do 175, or we'll do 150. And there was obviously a lot of effort and thought put into this, so I'm asking if
This would be the
there's,
fewest amount of accommodations requested, so that we erred on the side of caution for only 5 accommodations instead of maybe 7, 8, 12.
Yes, I guess what I'm asking is for all the ones, the three that were specifically 100 feet, right? If we go back to that there were only three, am I remembering
Right.
this right?
3, 4, and
Okay.
5.
So for those three, if that distance was 150 instead of 100, what would that do? Or if it was 175 instead of 100, or what drove it from 200 down to 100 is what I'm trying to understand.
They would lose lots.
I think that's where they
So
added the lots.
Okay,
they were trying to squeeze, given the location of the Grantree stands that they're trying to save, they're having to squeeze in. They can't spread out to get around something,
Okay.
they have to squeeze in.
and so what happened is some of the lots that were on the plan before that were taken out to preserve grand trees are now trying to be squeezed into the other spaces, so the total lots haven't changed.
Right.
But when you do that, it had to go all the way down to 100. I'm looking at some of the, it's like green space, this, that. If those particular, and I'm not sure I'm gonna get this right, looking at the diagram here, but the ones that are 100 feet apart, if they went, I guess, to the left and up a little bit, wouldn't that still create more space and not prohibit the lots? Or is there something geographically that's making that hard to do?
I do know they're working with some topography issues
That's-
in this. You can kind of see, let me get back to the one.
She
The
used a
purple
more
here,
professional
they have
word.
their
I
two
said geography.
strings.
She mean, topography is the right word, not geography. Sorry, yes. You keep me straight.
And one of the amenities is something that they were trying to avoid messing with. So the amenity up to the,
Okay,
yeah, this one got tight.
okay.
They still have significant tree save area too that they're working
Yes,
around.
they have more
so-
than 20% of the trees on the site are protected.
Any additional comments or questions? Is there a motion?
I would make a motion to approve with the 5 requests they've asked from Planning Commission. I feel like this fits exactly within the design parameters and allows us a little flexibility in being able to save larger groups of trees without really impacting the site.
I'll second that. I'm appreciative of the developer going back and, taking what we said and working with it, especially with those larger groves. Is there any additional discussion? For a vote, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
you.
Moving on to rezoning 2323.
Evening, everybody. This is a rezoning request here, case number 23-23 from Mr. Page on Anderson Road, 692-000042 and 074. And the request here is to rezone a 2.5-acre portion of 2 parcels from UD to LI. And the purpose here is to be able to allow the recombination of these 2 parcels, 2.5 acres, into another parcel that's zoned LI. And this would allow for a future expansion of existing business. Property is located in a wedge here between Anderson Road and Leslie Highway in the eastern part of York County. Zooming into the area here, as you can see that wedge between Anderson and Leslie, there's a variety of uses here right now. It's a combination of residential, there's some industrial, there's a school and some churches out in this area. Zooming into the property here, you can see the area in the hatched. It doesn't go well on the screen here, but the top parcel is where the existing business is. It's a motor vehicle repair services business right here. And this owner here would like to purchase this area here to be able to combine that to his property. As you can say, it kind of comes to a point down here, it gets kind of difficult to be able to maneuver some stuff, and he might in the future want to expand his business. This owner here is willing to sell some land to him as well. A lot of the area here is an easement for some power lines. The environmental map here, it's very flat land here, and there's no environmental features, any kind of water features. Zoning for the area, this gray area here is all UD. This is still an area of the county which still has a lot of UD properties. All the areas here are RMX 20 and some RUD as well across Anderson Road. For the future land use plan, the property here is within a neighborhood commercial node with underlying single-family residential. And as we know, that neighborhood center one is where it's a cluster of neighborhood serving businesses, typically located at intersections of major and minor roads. And they typically provide daily services for local residents. And then below that is also single-family residential, where you have single-family detached homes. So staff is recommending approval for this request. It does not align with the future land use map, because typically you would see the LI in areas where we designate as employment for the future land use designation, and this area is not designated as that. However, we still support the request because it does allow for the future expansion of existing business. This property here is located with so much UD around here. There already are some light industrial uses in the area. And it's also located along a principal arterial located very far away from residential homes as well. Any questions for staff?
I do have a question. Maybe I was just reading this wrong earlier, but so if I'm just looking at packet page 22, yeah, exactly. So the existing LI and then the hash mark area, that will become one parcel?
Correct.
And
Yeah,
then
they'll-
that will be separate from the other two, so there won't be any split zoning?
That's
or-
correct, yeah. So they will actually remove that hatched area from those two parcels and add them to the purple parcel.
So there will be 3 parcels altogether?
There will continue to be 3 parcels.
Okay, it just, the other one will get bigger?
2 residuals and 1 larger LI.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
One question, Diane. Typically, when we have lot lines that are moving and plat needs to be recorded, you typically have like a 90-day limit or a time limit. I don't know specifically.
That's true, yeah. We typically have a condition there, and
It's not in,
got the
it's-
packet?
No.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to add that to your motion, to go ahead and have that recorded within the next 90 days.
90 days
From-
after
from the third
reading. yeah.
Third reading is
Yeah.
how, yeah, apologize for not putting it in there. This one, as you can tell by the number, this has been on hold since March. There was a code violation, so we had to get that all cleaned up. That's been taken care of,
Another
and
one of
now we can go
those.
ahead and move forward, so they get back there and add that condition, so.
Okay.
And they're willing to do that, they're ready to go forward, so.
Yeah, that's,
That won't be an issue.
I just want to make sure we're consistent, that's all.
Sure, I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, Diane, one question. I know that you had mentioned that there are LI in the vicinity, and really the only difference I see in here is between UD and LI is retail. Do you think there's going to be any kind of negative impacts for this for this specific area if it goes LI, or what do you think?
I don't believe so, and I can kind of come back to the aerial here. I can even go back one, well, it's kind of hard to see at this scale here, but there's a lot of light industrial uses. There might not be light industrial zoning out there, but a lot of the folks there that have UD are implementing it as a light industrial use. And so I think there are those uses already there right now.
Okay, thanks.
And that, this is one owner of all 3 parcels, is that
No,
right?
one owner owns the 2 on the south, so this is owned by one person here, these 2, and then somebody else owns, Mr. Page owns that property here, Wistnet Trucking owns these 2 on the south. So it's 2 separate owners.
Okay,
So Mr. Page is purchasing this land here from,
okay.
yeah.
So there's a purchase involved as part of this as well? Okay,
Yep.
okay. That was, yeah, I was a little reading through, I could see that the 2 were one, and then, okay, wait a minute, that doesn't match the other guy, so thank you very much.
Any additional comments or questions? Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve with the condition that a plat be recorded reflecting the parcel combination no more than 90 days after the 3rd reading by council.
I second that.
Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on to 23-43.
Case number 2343 for Carolina Renovations on Rock Grove Avenue in Rock Hill, tax map number 67000000018. The request is to rezone a .323 acre parcel from UD to RMX 10, and the purpose here is to construct one single-family home. There was a home there previously. It was burnt down. It was destroyed by a fire more than 180 days ago, and therefore it no longer has that grandfather status, so they had to get the property rezoned to come back in and rebuild the home. Located off of Porter Road in the Rock Hill area. Zooming in here, or the aerial here, all that gray area, that shaded part, that's all the city of Rock Hill. This is one of those donut holes within the county. As you can see, we're within a neighborhood, and that's the home that's the remnants of that was destroyed by fire. But the rest of the area here is already residential. Very flat piece of property, no water features. Zoning for the area, there's still a lot of properties here that are currently zoned UD. The other ones around it that are RSF 30, most of those, if not all of those, came through when we had our UD rezoning process. And they went to RSF 30 mostly because there wasn't the lot size issue at the time to go to a smaller lot size or the designation, and they have mobile homes with manufactured housing. And so they chose that district because to make their property continue to be compliant. So given the fact that if you have a lot size that's less than 30,000 square feet, you have to go to a different district. That's why they're choosing the RMX 10. The future land use map for the area here is municipal infill. And as you know, then we refer to the city of Rock Hill or Fort Mill or Clover, wherever happen to be nearby, and see what their plans say. And Rock Hill recommends this area here for interstate employment. That's where you would see manufacturing, warehousing, other freight type uses. We don't agree that's the right designation for this area right here, so we're going to recommend approval for this one. It does not align with the comprehensive future land use map because it doesn't meet Rock Hill's plan. However, it does support certain strategies within our comprehensive plan for housing. And those two would be, as I mentioned in the staff report, housing goal H3, to preserve and protect existing residential neighborhoods, and then to support rezonings that also are compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. And that's why we recommend approval. Any questions of staff?
So can you back up just a couple slides to the one yep. So all of that around there is Rock Hill. So this is
So all
kind of
the-
like a donut
Sure,
area?
all the light
Okay.
gray here, that's all Rock Hill, and the dark gray here is the county. So
And
if
I'm-
you go
I'm-
back to that one, you can see it as well.
There we go, okay. And
Yeah.
so what, Rock Hill includes this section as part of, or are you saying that their plan around that section
No,
is
they
for that?
plan right through that. And we
Okay.
both do.
Yeah, yeah.
Typically, you want to go across either other jurisdictions, and especially for the town, because they're going to eventually annex through this area here, so they want to go ahead and establish their plan. And so we look to their plan for our recommendations.
Okay, but
And
that,
they have that interstate swath kind of runs along this area here.
right,
And-
so that, this entire picture we're looking at, they plan for that
Correct.
that type of development?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, that was it.
Any additional questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on to rezoning 23-45.
Case 2345, Vincent on Vincent Road in Rock Hill, 75100000002. The request is to rezone a 71-acre portion of a 76, I believe, acre parcel from RSF 40 to RUD. And the purpose here is to be able to recombine the parcel with two adjacent parcels that are already zoned RUD. And this property here also has a split zoning of RSF 40 and RUD. So in order to combine all that, we need to get to one district, and we're going to go to RUD. Property is located on the eastern part of the county, not too far from Lancaster County, not too far also from the Indian Nation. As you can see, that's in the gray area. That's the Indian Nation. And this is a very rural part of the county. There are a lot of homes out here, some larger lots. There's been some subdivision over the years. Zooming into the property here, the property is, the larger one is the farm. I think he grows cows, he raises cows and grows vegetables as well. And I can tell on this map, you can see how it's got parcel zoning here, so it's split within that. And they want to be able to combine this large parcel with this parcel and that parcel. So he owns all of that. They want to put it all into one large parcel, they're going to go to RUD. And they're choosing RUD because of the fact they have a farm there, existing farm. Comprehensive plan for the area here is rural residential. As you know, that is areas for rural character with homes that are 1 acre or more, separated by farm fields, pastures, and forests. We're recommending approval. This will align with the comprehensive land use map and the plan.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to rezoning 23-46.
Okay, case number 2346 for Brian Follen on Highway 321 in Clover, is tax map number 373000040. And the request here is to rezone a .81 acre parcel from RSF30 to RMX10. And the purpose is to be able to create a parcel for the two existing homes. And each parcel will be either 19,000 and 16,000 square feet each. Property is located on Highway 321, not too far from the Gaston County line, just north of the town of Clover. The area here is, this is a strip along 321, a mixture of uses. This stretch right here is pretty much residential. Zooming into the property here, it's hard to tell from the aerial, but you see the one house here. There is a house in here. So the request is to be able to subdivide the property and have the two separate parcels. Zoning for the area here is mostly RSF30. There is some UD as well as some RMX20. Comprehensive land use plan for this section here is single-family residential. And as you know, that's detached homes on large lots, suburban character. And so we recommend approval. This one also does not align with the future land use map because typically you would see this designation for a 30,000 or 40,000 square foot lot, which would be the RSF 30s or 40. RMX 10 typically is a neighborhood residential designation. However, we do support that because the parcel currently has two homes, and this will allow them to be able to remove that non-conforming use and subdivide the property at the smaller lot sizes. Any questions for staff?
Just one question again. Would the plat being recorded be a condition?
It's not required because it's going to be, so if the entire property is being rezoned. They aren't doing a portion of it, so there's no requirement for the condition to, the other ones are more about because they're going to be
Yeah,
rezoning.
I
the-
understand
Okay.
what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Diane, how did this one come up?
This one came up because, I don't know, about a year ago, they wanted to do that, and then they had first get a variance because they had a road frontage requirement. And so they want to be able to sell one of the lots, one of the homes, and so to do that, they need to go ahead and subdivide it. So they first got it required, get the.
I'm
they
clear
get a
now, yeah,
variance.
just that they want to sell
They
one,
want to sell one of the
and in
homes.
order to do that, the property needs to be split.
Correct.
I'm with you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Diane, do we know who owns that corner lot? There's a very small, between Flatstone Drive and Highway
I
321.
do not know who's that. I'm trying to think.
It's listed,
looks
I
like a-
think it was Sue Nichols.
The name,
It's,
who
looks
knows?
vacant.
No.
Doesn't seem to be anybody,
It looks pretty vacant. I can't-
doesn't look like any of the neighbors own it either. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any additional questions? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to zoning code modification.
Sure, tonight we have two text amendments. The first one here is for tattoo and body piercing establishments. And the council's Planning and Zoning Committee has asked staff to consider a text amendment that would make the use separation less restrictive. So currently, you can do, and it's a tattoo and body piercing step is the same thing. It's the same category. So even though it's two separate types of services, it's all defined as being one thing, just sort of for clarification. It's currently allowed in the GC, general commercial, and the mixed use districts. And with that, they have to have separation requirements, and that's 300 feet from any other tattoo or body piercing establishment, as well as 200 feet between the use and any lot that's a residential district, so zoned residential, or have a dwelling on there. So you could be zoned something else and have a house there. You have to have 200 feet away from that. That's what it is currently. And so we were asked a little bit less restrictive. And a lot of times the issue is the residential district separation requirement, because many times you have a general GC property, a parcel, that's actually abuts a residential district, and therefore it's difficult to be able to make that requirement. So what we did is we tried to make it a little less restrictive, and just to let you know that DHEC does enforce a 1,000-foot separation between tattoo establishments and churches, schools, and playgrounds. They already have some requirements through there. And so what the committee found after talking about it was to reduce or actually remove the requirement to separate between residential districts or residential dwellings, and just be able to keep that 300 feet separation from another one, so you can prevent the proliferation and clustering of that use in one location.
Quick question. So if you ended up, for example, like you said, with a house that happens to fall, say, in the same zoning, and then tattoo parlor wants to come in, which I have no problem with, but would there then be a buffer requirement, since they could possibly be actually the same zoning where there would not normally be a buffer requirement?
So if you are coming in, it's trying to get that, make sure I got a picture in my head there, that question. If you have a house, like there's a house.
Like a non-conforming, say there's a house on a,
in GC, you live
Yeah.
in there right now, and somebody comes in there and they develop a
tattoo parlor
what do you call
50 feet away.
So they would have to separate based upon the use. At one time, our previous code was the buffers were required based upon district,
Okay,
and now it's based upon use. So if they were to come in to establish, they would buffer against the use next door, would be the home. So yes, they have to put a buffer for that one. Not a separation thing, but a buffer
Right.
between, yes.
I was just wondering in point 1.3, if, do you think we need to show the reference to this rule that is in the South Carolina DHEC, that separate distances of 1,000 feet? Should we refer to some to make it official?
Within
guess.
our code?
Yeah,
We typically, if they have it in their code, not to have the same thing duplicated in ours, if something was to happen, they were to remove it, we can come back in and put it in if we need to. But it's better to leave, if they have theirs, let them do that and rely upon theirs. So,
Yeah,
I was just
we-
wondering
saying
if there
do
could be
we-
a reference
do we
to
reference-
yeah,
that
is there a
code.
reference to that
Well,
section of the
then if
DHEC
if
code?
they change their section of their code.
Oh, I see
Then
what
our
you're saying.
section is no longer valid because they've changed their code. So it's
Okay.
best not to be able to reference somebody else's code within your code.
I got you. Thanks.
So, I may beat the dead horse here. So, when this is rewritten, there won't be any reference to DHEC.
No,
Right.
it's just there as a
No.
finding. to kind of in
Understood,
support
so
of
there,
what's
there
going
won't
on.
be any reference to DHEC, so the regulations surrounding DHEC would be something that the applicant would find out when, if they were looking to put a parlor in.
When they go for their approvals through the state, they have to go through that, and I'm not familiar with how their process works,
Okay,
but they must have to do something and then get approval from them to be able to do that use there. Maybe, probably because of some sort of a health requirement, I would imagine.
so there's some kind of health license or something that has to be issued by DHEC, so they would
Yes.
go through a review process there where they'd get that feedback, so
Exactly.
that,
Yes. That's why, I would imagine
that
that's how it
clarifies
works.
it for me.
However, if that 1,000-foot changed, then it would have to reflect in here, right?
If we put it in our zoning ordinance, yes. What
It's
you're
not
looking
in
at
there
here is just
currently.
the findings. This is just there to kind of give you information. So,
Okay.
yes, that's why I wouldn't want to put it in our zoning
I
ordinance,
got
because
you.
if they changed it, I'd rather just you do what they have.
I was just saying, you know, if there was a change to this, okay.
Are there additional questions?
No.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Sorry, I didn't ask for discussion. Sir.
That's
Good. I think the discussion happened in questions.
Okay, so there was no discussion, correct?
Right,
Good.
you're good, Kate.
You good?
And then moving on to the second amendment.
So our second text amendment here, it revolves around grand trees. In council workshops in October and November, they discussed the grand tree ordinance. And we've been changing it a few times over the past 2 years. I think we've had it 3 times in the past 2 years. We've made amendments to it. And so they asked us to do one more amendment, and that's saying that the current DBH, which is the diameter at breast height, it's a matter of measurement play, of certain species is too restrictive. And that we should remove that, or change that to reflect the size where it's necessary to establish protection. And you can see here on the table, what they were recommending us to do would be to remove any consideration of a loblolly or shortleaf pine at all as being a grand tree, to increase the size of the dogwood to a 12-inch, blackjack, oak, redbud, sassafras, and sourwood to 10 inches. And then all other species would go from being a 24-inch grand tree, now it needs to be a 32 before it becomes a grand tree. So that's the first part of this amendment. I want to go ahead through the whole thing, and we can come back and then we can ask your questions if you have any of those at the end. The second component is that there are certain uses that should be allowed more predictability when it comes time to mitigate grand trees. And just kind of as a reminder for you guys, when you have a mitigation, there's 3 options if you have grand trees. And they're listed in the way of our preference. So the first thing you would do would be preserve more open space. Tree safe. So if you have a very treed lot, you'd be able to very easily, in many cases, just put a drawing over some trees, make that your additional tree safe to help mitigate it. Or you can plant new trees. So if you have space, you can go ahead and you can also plant new trees. But if your lot is constrained and you cannot achieve either of those 2 things, we have the option to do the York County Tree Fund, and you can do a fee in lieu and mitigate that. Right now, no more than half of the DBHs to be mitigated may be done through that fee in lieu. And like you say, we prefer you to go ahead and save more trees. If you can't do that, plant some, and if you can't do that, pay some money into the fee. This amendment would say that schools, industrial, and commercial projects would not have to be limited to that 50% or half can be mitigated through paying money. They could pay their entire pocket. They can just go ahead, instead of having to do a tree save or plant more trees, they can just pay the money and put that money towards a fee in lieu. And so that what this amendment here would do would be remove that requirement to only half. And open for any questions.
So who requested this?
Council.
Council. And they were getting their feedback from developers?
I can't speak for that.
Okay. So essentially, we're asking that schools, industrial properties, and commercial developments can just come in and clear cut. That's what it sounds like.
That's really,
I mean, bottom line.
It comes down to that. It takes away them having to look at other opportunities or other methods to be able to preserve grand trees. And they would be able to just remove them and then pay the fee without having to.
Does that also apply for buffers? Is that the entire property, or is that the buildable?
No, the buffers must be maintained. So that's only going to be in the areas where they were going to be doing their development. So they would still maintain, if there's a grand tree in the buffer, that grand tree remains. This is just when you have a grand tree internal to the property itself that needs to be removed because you're going to be putting something there. And so this would be able to allow them to not have to
Work is hard.
work with staff or anybody to be able to find alternatives to it. They have the right to be able to just go ahead and write the check.
Diane, go ahead.
Good, John, I'll come back.
Thank you. You mentioned that there were 2 workshops that this was discussed at over the last several months.
Correct.
I was in attendance at the last one, and the only thing that I see that's different is that they discuss school and industrial. It looks like commercial has been added.
No, that actually came from their
That-
written statement.
That came from their written statement?
Yes.
Okay.
You were saying someone or some group deemed it too restrictive. Who was that?
Like I said, this was at a council workshop. What influences them, I don't know. This came from a council workshop to make this, to discuss the grand trees and consider different ways to be able to address grand trees. That was the direction of council to do something, and this is what they discussed at the council workshop, is what we're presenting here.
Was an arborist involved in this?
I do not know. I know we have an arborist, and this is not what we wrote. I can kind of going back to what was done here, this was designed by an arborist. And so what we recommended in Recode when we did this was looked at by an arborist, and that's what we established for those numbers.
So nobody on council has stated that these revised numbers came from an arborist?
I do not know their origins.
Okay.
So, one of my issues with this is that it's expected, I guess, 2 sets of rules. You have the general populace having to follow one rule, and then these special exceptions for these schools and industrial uses. So I just wanted to make that point. I don't think that that's fair to have that in place.
Yep. Residential is something that, they have to follow everything with residential.
I've got a couple real
Sure.
quick. So can we go back to your other slide with the options? So the plant new trees. When they plant new trees, is there some calculation done to get back to the same rough canopy cover? Or what does the plant new trees mean? I can
Sure,
put like
there- as I
4
think
Christmas
as-
trees and I'm good, or what is,
As Mary did mention before when you asked from the previous one, there is a formula for that. And
Okay.
it's not going to be an inch to inch because you're going to assume a canopy.
Right.
And so therefore, there is some discounted number. And so they would have to put, and I want to say it's 0.75, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's okay.
It's
It
about
But the,
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's on
It's
this
in here.
last,
That's
it's
what
on
it
this.
says.
it's
Okay,
on.
so there you go.
Yeah.
So that tells you how you could actually, if you were going to plant new trees, that's how you were to do it. Now,
Well,
I will
the-
say that this
the-
doesn't preclude any of these 3 categories from not doing these other things. They just gives them the right to be able to go right to the number 3 and foregoing 1 and 2.
Understood. What I was a little confused by is the DBH is the size of the trunk, right?
Correct,
Okay, but that's not necessarily how much canopy you have,
correct.
right? And so what I was asking is the planting trees intended to get to a certain amount of canopy
Yes.
replacement, not necessarily how big the trunks are?
Well, but
25 years.
DBH is not just
Right.
diameter, it's diameter times how you can
Well,
see.
No, the DBH is the diameter
Is
of
it
breast height.
just-
Yeah.
So it is
Breast height,
measured at
Oh,
4
breast
feet
height.
Yes.
above,
It's-
maybe 4.5.
Yeah,
And
It's
that's
where
a
you
certain
actually hug the
measurement
tree.
for it. And it's assumed, the assumption is that over time, it'll grow and create a canopy.
Right,
So you aren't gonna replace a 40-foot tree, but eventually over time it'll become a 40-foot canopy.
right. No, more of what I was thinking was trying to, maybe getting way down in the weeds here with the math and the algorithm, but, if I plant 6 trees, well, 10 years from now, I'm probably not gonna have the same canopy if I took down 6 bigger trees. But at some point in the future, I might get back to that canopy. And so I was trying, what is the intent here? Is the intent the number of trees I see, or is it the amount of canopy cover? Or when we talk about replacing them, what the intent is?
The intent is canopy cover.
Okay.
So it's meant to, over time, to be able to mitigate our loss of tree canopy and to be able to have some to come back. We'll never get back to where we were before, no matter what we do. But if we can be able to identify areas where we can have some replacement of our canopy, this is what we want to see.
I might be going a little out of order, but I'm with Aubrey a little bit, that I have some heartburn that these particular groups are given the ability to go through the express lane and just pay a fine, so to speak, and clear cut everything out. I think there might be some middle ground or some other options of how they might have to do some replacement, but maybe not as much based on the type of institutions these are, where they look for a little bit broader spaces, right? You know, in a residential area, we're not necessarily looking for as much open parking space as you might have in an industrial. And so then, once you look at an industrial parking lot, to have 250 people work at a particular site, well, now you're in trouble with tree save, and how do I do that, and how do I replace that canopy, and can I actually do that with all that asphalt and concrete I've got to put down for people to have a place to park? So I can see how in some of these institutions, by their nature, it's challenging to replace all the trees, but I don't know if I feel totally comfortable just giving them just write a bigger check and you can do whatever you want.
This is a comment too, and I'm sorry, is that okay? What we were doing earlier this evening, you know, going through and moving lots, you know, to accommodate and to take out less trees. I think that's a great exercise. And if we vote yes on this, they don't have to go through that. They don't have to go through adjusting their site, their buildings, if it's commercial or industrial. There's no incentive to do that. And I have a problem with that. But anyways.
Yeah. Diane, you mentioned that these, let's call them rules, have been in effect for a period of time. And am I quoting you correctly if it's since recode?
Yeah, I believe it was written in one of the memos to council that we have changed the code of ordinances twice in the last 3 years. And so we really haven't had a chance to be able to sit with it and see how it works.
Well, that was exactly my point. I mean, there's a process involved, and everybody should be going through the same process. And we have a planning department that has oversight on this, and I just feel like in some instances, again, we would be taking that process and changing it based on a particular type of development, whether it be commercial or school, without, let's call it due process. Because right now, it's still York County Planning that determines whether or not these rules affect these particular developments. So the second point I would ask is, that process is in place today. Do you have a feel for what % of mitigation requests have actually been approved or denied, whichever is the smaller group?
Sure,
or
we are
larger group?
in the 90 percentile of mitigation requests approved. So we've been able to work out, and it's in probably the low to mid 90s.
Okay.
As we get them in, we've been able to work with developers to be able to figure out the best way to mitigate them. And so and they do remove them, but they work through their process.
Right.
Can-
Okay.
Can I make a little distinction there of how much of that's on the categories here we're talking about? And I don't know how many schools we've had cleared for recently, but some of the commercial and industrial stuff.
Right, I don't have the information in front of me to say, but I would say the majority of those are going out. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe they're more on the commercial and industrial side and school side, that we've been able to work with them to be able to do a tree save or plant some things back. We have not collected any funds, by the way. There's been no money paid to a tree fund. Everything's been able to be worked out by either a tree save or planting new trees.
And that's without any variances or?
Correct, yes.
And that's the goal, right? We want that because those are the
Yeah.
first two things, so it's working.
It's working.
It's
Yeah.
working.
Yeah,
Um,
good point.
I just, when I look at the school and industrial component, I think of larger sites. They typically have larger footprints. There's a larger plan in place. Even with the schools, they'll have ball fields and all that. With the commercial, I I see this being brought down to the 2 acres sites that have, you know, and the smaller sites. It's not, if they were only large commercial developments where it was, you had something like a Galleria type mall going in, where it, you know, it needed space like that, I probably would be more inclined, but I just see this happening on smaller sites as well, which is, I don't think that's really what we're looking for.
But it could still be mitigated.
It could still be mitigated, but there's other ways.
Can
Especially
you
when you get
remind,
to smaller sites,
Oh.
there's a lot more that can, I feel like can be done.
can you remind us real quick how this scales from smaller to larger sites? I mean, is it,
Yeah, that's a good,
are you picking based on a percentage of total area, or what is the?
What do you mean, are we picking? I mean, like-
In other words, when,
Say that.
when we say, okay, you're going to remove this amount of trees, but you have to save this amount, is that handled in a percentage of the total area of the lot, or how are we trying to get from what was there and getting back as close to what was there, even though there's something new
The things that
installed?
we're gonna look at is what is the current tree canopy of the property? What are we looking at in terms of, can they save additional trees? What are they doing, and where are these trees located? In some places, it might be where that needs to be, where that building needs to go. And so therefore, that grand tree will come down, but they'll mitigate some other way. And if it's a large lot and they have areas to be able to put in additional trees, then they can, or they can have, or if they have a tree coverage already, they can save more trees that way. So it's a case-by-case thing. It just depends upon what tree cover is on that piece of property at the time. Like you mentioned, for a commercial, for a smaller one, you can move some buildings around. And then you can keep that tree and make that tree a landmark to that development. And so working with staff, we can maybe identify what's an important tree to keep. But we also recognize there are trees that must come down just for the development process to function properly.
Sure. I guess tangential to that is, let's say that we've got a 2-acre piece of property, kind of like the one we talked about with the gentleman that's recombining and
Mhm.
making some more room for the auto thing, right? If all of that property was just flat-out trees, so you have 100% canopy cover, is there any if there's not a grand tree in that area, he has no restrictions, and he could cut all that down with no penalty, no problem, and no have to replace it, or is there a certain amount of canopy he's got?
Well, he would have to identify for a commercial project, I think it's 20%, or there's some number.
That's what
gonna
I'm,
be open space, tree save area, and then buffers, and so the buffers must stay there no matter what. So he would be able to, if there's no grand tree there, clear that area there to be able to expand his business. But if there happens to be a grand tree there, that would have to be.
right, that's what I'm trying to make the distinction here.
Yeah.
What we're really talking about here is grand trees.
We're only talking about grand trees.
We're not talking about overall canopy cover and other
No.
requirements that are in
We're
other
only
places
talking
in the
about
code.
grand trees.
Okay. So,
So remember, there's two components of the amendment here. What is a grand tree,
Yes.
and shall it be allowed to be removed without any kind of requirement of staff intervention? Remember, there's
So-
two parts of that discussion.
my next question is about the first part. Has there been any problems or difficulties in people trying to abide by the size requirements and saying it's too many trees or too much?
No,
sure
there
somebody's-
hasn't been, and when we did this, and I can show you, I can just kind of hold up to you, that we went out and we looked at everyone's code and say, what are we like with everybody else? And we looked at Rock Hill, Fort Mill, TDK, York, we looked at other counties across the state, Greenville to Richland, and where are we? You know, we don't want to be an outlier on either end, we want to be like in the middle. And that's what we came up, we feel like this is a good place for the York County to be, this is nice in the middle. We're not going to go too far, we're not going to go too lenient. So that's how we came to our information. And then the individual species, that was looking at by arborists. And some counties, they have a lot larger list because they might have more important trees. You might down in the lower part of the state have different kinds of requirements down there. So we wanted to kind of make that more York County specific. So that's why we massaged that list to what it is right now. We felt it was a very good list that reflects our county, and we thought we should be within within the state.
So if I may, just to clarify, you're supporting the 24 or the 32-inch?
We are supporting it as it is right now, as a
So it is 24 right now?
24.
Okay.
That's what we are supporting.
Do we know the reason that the loblolly and the short-leaf pine was completely eliminated?
The person that made the recommendation felt there was no value in that tree.
There was discussion during RECODE about that too, so, about the loblollies and.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I think we let it go, I think higher. Because a larger one, yes, a smaller one, and they snap off, so why that was higher than the other ones were, in the 24s.
All right, so to walk us through a scenario here, if this commission decides tonight to deny both of these, they still go forward to the,
Yes, what you're giving here is a
Council.
recommendation of the planning commission to county council.
Right.
So whatever your comments are, or whatever your thoughts are, be part of your motion and part of the discussion here that we can relay that to county council when they make their final determination.
but really, it's gonna be their decision
It is,
to make these changes
but you have
or
an
not.
important place,
It's
play in
always
this.
their
It's your
decision.
role here is to make a recommendation
Right.
to them.
It's
Sure.
just,
Like
okay.
everything else that you do, it's a recommendation.
Diane, does the planning department have a position on this?
Like I said a
Just-
second ago, was that we
Yeah.
don't give full recommendations. However, we feel as though it's been amended a couple times over the
Yeah.
past few years, and we want to let it the way it is right now, let it stay.
Okay,
And so that we can keep working with this as it is. That would be our recommendation.
thank you.
We haven't let the silt fill to the bottom of the barrel yet.
Give it
The
time.
water's still muddy, we need some time to see, huh? Okay. Based on all of this, I'm inclined to recommend against this now and let
Yeah.
council give us some, if council wants to go that direction, that's fine, but I think everything we've discussed and what the planning department's told us tonight, we should leave this as it is for a while and maybe revisit some other time.
Yeah, I second
So-
that.
I'm in
That's-
agreement on that.
You making a motion?
So it's an official motion to deny both of these.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
There's a second. Is there additional discussion?
Matt?
Mike was the first.
I'm
Mike
sorry,
seconded
I
or
was the
was
first,
second?
Bonnie, and Matt second.
I think Antonio was actually the second. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Antonio, I'm
That's
sorry.
fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, I agree, and really, it goes back to what you said, Diane. I think, I don't think this has been in place long enough for us to really see where the problematic areas are. I think this seems a little more reactive, kind of knee-jerk reaction. I don't feel comfortable with it. There's no real substance to why it's being changed, other than it was requested by council, which I understand that's their prerogative, but, I mean, if we have 90-something% compliance with it, I think it's working.
Yeah.
As difficult as it may be, and I'm not gonna say it's an easy ordinance to comply with, it seems like it's working. And there is still the fee in lieu, as an option, but it's not I guess what you say, the easiest option.
And as a county, through our elected officials, we have basically said this is important to us. And so I don't think that saying one group should have to follow and another group should be free to skip
Right.
the line.
Yeah, and I would support the current process. I mean, there's administrative approval, there's oversight, and the control stays with the county, not with whoever's submitting, or would not have to submit a plan to mitigate.
Just to add to the comment, I guess I come back to two things. I question who initiated this, and then secondly, I mean, the county went to great trouble to have an arborist, look through that list and make recommendations, and there's no documentation in this proposal to back up their requests. So for all of those reasons, sounds like we have a first and a second, and we've had discussion. Is there a vote? All in favor?
I just have one more question for
Sorry.
you, Diane. I'm sorry. So right now, they can do 50% fee in lieu
Yes. Of the inches.
of the inches. Does does the waiver allow them to come to a planning commission to ask for more, or is it capped at 50?
That I don't know, if they can request a waiver from that. I'm not 100% certain. It's a numerical thing, so many times we do allow that as a waiver for that. So I don't know, to be honest with you.
Has that just not come up? It hasn't
It has
needed?
not come
Yeah,
up.
it's never,
There hasn't been a
I was
need.
just
Because,
curious
like I
if
said,
that could be an
everyone has been
option.
able to go with option number 1 and 2, and never even considered the tree fund.
Okay.
So any additional discussion? So the motion to deny both of the recommendations is on the table with a second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. And it looks like we're looking over the proposed dates for next year.
That
These
just-
are pretty much not proposed, these are pretty much established,
Yeah.
correct?
It
But we
says
will
like-
call out, there is one Tuesday meeting on there,
Yes.
because we now get Veterans Day off, thank you, council. And so that bumps this next year, didn't bump us this year, but it'll bump us next year to a Tuesday meeting.
Okay. Moving on to the rezoning tracking sheet, are there any questions or concerns?
I think you,
Need a motion to adopt.
We
the
have
calendar.
to,
Oh,
we
sorry.
have to adopt the schedule as read, right?
My fault. Yes. Would there be a
So a motion to
A motion?
approve next year's meeting schedule.
second?
Second.
First and second. So, any additional discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Now moving on to the tracking sheet. Any questions or concerns? No? Okay. So we will adjourn if there's a motion.
I'll make a motion to dismiss.
I'll second.
So Matt and John, all those in favor? Good night.
Have a good holiday season.
Yeah.